Hi guys, and welcome to today's tutorial. In today's lesson we're going to look at the chapter on economic inequalities, and we're going to look at how rich countries exploit the poor countries. So first of all, there's a massive divide throughout the world between rich countries and poor countries, and there's a few reasons why the poor countries get exploited by the rich countries. The first factor that we're going to look at is colonialism. So colonialism is the first factor. Okay, so in the past, many countries were exploring like different areas such as Africa and South America and parts of Asia, and they conquered them, and then they became a colony of those European countries. And still today, European governments exploit the colonies' resources. So European governments exploit the colonies' resources. Why do they exploit the colonies' resources? Because they can help themselves and make themselves richer, and make a lot of profits off this. So what's actually happened is the gap between the rich and the poor is actually increasing, because the rich is getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And this division in the world is sometimes called like the North and South gap. And basically what that means is usually countries that are in the northern hemisphere are rich, and the countries in the southern hemisphere, apart from mainly like Australia and New Zealand, are actually poor. And one of the main things is because of this colonialism, because in the past these countries conquered other countries, such as like countries in Africa and South America and in parts of Asia, and still to this day they are being exploited by the rich countries for all their resources that they have. The next one is trade. So poor countries are exploited because of their cheap raw materials and unprocessed minerals, and crops such as coffee and cotton have become cash crops. So these are huge reasons why these poor countries are being exploited, because rich countries are taking the cheap raw materials and minerals, and they're taking these raw materials and these minerals and then maybe turn them into finished goods or semi-finished goods and selling them in the rich countries and making lots of money for it. As well as that, poor countries make a lot of cash crops. So what I mean by cash crops is they make crops purely just to sell to the rich countries in the north, and then these will be sold on for a much higher price, where most of the profits then are kept by these rich countries. The next way that rich countries are exploiting the poor countries is because of debt. And what I mean by debt is, this is a huge problem for many countries in the south, so in the third world, because money is often spent on expensive and unnecessary projects such as like getting arms and so on. And some leaders are also corrupt, and they steal the money that should be used to run the country. So what's actually happened is that lots and lots of foreign banks lend money in loans to these poor countries, but they charge them very high interest. And because these countries are so poor, they find it hard to pay back the loan, or the interest, never mind pay back the loan itself. I'll give you an example. In the sub-Saharan African, the annual spending is around $12 per person on health, and they spend $22 per person on repaying back the debt that they owe. So they're spending nearly double the amount paying back a loan and the interest than compared to what they actually spend on healthcare per person. So it's huge. They're absolutely crippled with debt, and they can hardly pay back the interest. Never mind pay back the entire loan. So because of this, because of these foreign debts, they're just getting heavier and heavier into debt because of the high interest that they're being charged. So I'll just say here, charged very high interest and struggle to pay back foreign loans, therefore leading to further debt. I'll just say in Africa, $12 spent on health per person, and 22 spent on repaying debt per person. Okay, the next one we're going to look at is corruption. And corruption is a huge problem in developing countries. And very often what happens is money that's meant to go to the people of the country sometimes doesn't actually get to those people, or maybe the money that is given maybe in aid to the country sometimes isn't used for the purpose that's given, and it's very often that's spent on military, or sometimes it's pocketed by the richer people of that country. So corruption is a huge problem. So we'll say like some money sometimes kept by people in charge or spent on things like the military. And this is a huge problem when there is corruption, particularly in in a developing country, because then they just get exploited even more. So they're getting exploited by the rich countries, and then they're getting exploited by the rich people of their own country. So it's like catch-22. They can't really do anything. They're in such a dire position, and it just is made worse. Okay, so that's it for today's tutorial. We looked at how rich countries are exploiting the poorer countries of the world, and how that the gap between the rich and the poor is growing. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and there's many reasons for this, and we looked at 4 main factors. So we looked at colonization, we looked at unfair trade, we looked at debt, and we looked at corruption, and how they play a huge role in making this gap get increasingly bigger. If you'd like some more videos, please check out our website, examvision.ie, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks, guys.